The C3 Corvette. The Chevrolet Corvettes built between 1968 and 1982 have a reputation of being not very good. In case, why is that?
It's for a few reasons, Tommy. It's for horsepower, emissions, definitely build quality.
Yeah, I mean, the list goes on and on, but in this video, I'm gonna make the pitch for the C3 Corvette, and we're gonna find out, is it as bad as some of the kids are saying these days?
Corvette, America's only true sports car. Most Corvette prospects, being sports car enthusiasts, are knowledgeable concerning the product they intend to purchase.
There are 8 generations of Chevrolet Corvette. This is the 3rd generation, called the C3. And if you ask the typical person, what is the worst Corvette? It's C3 and C4, kind of fighting it out at the bottom here. But the C3 Corvette is a very cool car that has some very fundamental flaws, which we'll talk about in this video. But one of the flaws is definitely not the exterior design.
The final design for the C3 Corvette came from a concept called the Mako Shark 2. And what they landed on was absolutely spectacular. You've got these very defined fenders and a little bit of that classic muscle car Coke bottle shape that is just stunning. It's no wonder that so many astronauts were willing to be seen in one of these.
Not all 3rd generation Corvettes look the same though. Over that 14-year production run, there are really 3 different body styles. There's 68 through 72, which is this body style with the chrome front and rear bumpers. There's 72 through 78, and then 78 through 82, they look a little bit different. But one of the most identifiable features of any C3 Corvette are the headlights. Now these headlights are vacuum controlled, and it's one of the coolest features of this car. Put them down, Case will show it one more time. Now, this was such an iconic design. You want to pop them up, and I absolutely love this feature on this car. It's just, I know it's a silly thing, and if you've been around for a while, these are probably nothing to talk about, but as a younger guy into cars, I think that's really cool. Now, you might notice that you can actually see the headlights through the front grille on this car. That's because we're actually missing these little guards that kind of protect the headlights, but I love this on this car.
As most people are aware, these cars have fiberglass bodies, and like Tommy mentioned, this being an early model has steel bumpers rather than the unshapely urethane bumpers that were on some of the later model C3s.
Talking about engines on C3 Corvettes is a kind of a minefield because there were so many different options. So for example, this 1968 has a 327 cubic inch V8, at least they're all V8s. Now this engine is rated at 300 horsepower. You're thinking, wow, that's pretty good. Keep in mind though, that was gross horsepower, not net horsepower. So realistically, probably a little bit overrated, but these cars could be had with big blocks all the way up to 435 horsepower. Gross horsepower, not net horsepower. But here's the thing. By the early to mid 1970s, things really took a turn for the worst with the fuel crisis and then also establishment of emissions regulations. By 75, 76, these cars were making somewhere between 165 to 180 horsepower. And paired with a 3-speed automatic, that means these cars had about as much performance as I do, which is to say none at all. So these early cars could be had with big powerful engines and manual transmissions that could do crazy burnouts, but by the late 70s, there wasn't a lot going on underneath the hood.
This car had another interesting feature that was known to have some issues, as does ours, because you gotta get the switch just in the right spot, but you've got these hideaway windshield wipers, which are pretty cool when they work, but they don't always.
One of the absolutely craziest things when I first laid hands on this Corvette that I just couldn't believe is the fact that there's no trunk in this Corvette. I don't mean like, oh, the trunk is really small, it doesn't fit anything. I literally mean there's no trunk. Look at the back end of this car. There is no cutout for where the trunk would be. Instead, Chevrolet back in 1968 said, we've got you covered. If you pop this little tonneau cover here, you can see the convertible top because this one is a convertible. And then you have about 18 inches worth of space behind the seats. And that is seriously all the storage inside this car. There are some cubbies which you can pop open so you can, put your registration and some knickknacks, but there's no glove box and there's also no trunk. So you better not want to carry anything larger than like a watermelon
One thing that I love about older Corvettes is the fuel fill in the center at the rear of the car. This means you can fill it up from either side. If you're at the gas station, pull up to the pump either on your left or on your right, which is nice. However, you do have to be careful when you're taking the hose away from the car not to drip fuel on your paint.
The general rule with third generation Corvettes are the older ones are more desirable, which makes sense. They've typically got more power, they look a little cooler. There is an asterisk there, though, because some Corvette aficionados don't love C3s. They've got a bunch of weird one-year-only things, like this door handle. In every other C3, to open the door, you push in on this little flap, and then that unlatches the door and you pull it open. But on 68s and 68s only, you actually have to push in on the little lock cylinder to unlatch the door. And that's proof that maybe things aren't what they seem with 68 Corvettes. Here's the thing. 1960s General Motors, not typically known for their Toyota-like build quality, but 68 Corvettes had a reputation for being terribly made, like they hadn't quite finished the car. At least that's what one of the magazines said when GM loaned them a car. They returned it after a short period and said, bring it back when it's done. And stuff like that door handle and even the tail lights. 68 Corvettes have just a flat tail light here with the reverse light underneath the bumper, where every other Corvette of this era has the reverse light built in nice and elegantly. It kind of seems like this car wasn't really done when they brought it to production. So a lot of folks prefer 69 and upwards. They sorted a bunch of stuff out and they're a little bit more cohesive.
And speaking of those taillights, this car has a pretty forward-looking feature related to them. There are a couple lights here to indicate whether your left tail lamps, your right tail lamps, or even your license plate illumination is working. And the way that that is engineered is through actual fiber optic tubes that carry that light from your tail lamps in the rear into your center console.
With the headlights and taillights on, there are light tubes that extend all around the car to this little panel down here by the shifter that tell you when something has failed. You can see it up there as well. What a cool idea. It uses no additional electronics, no additional bulbs, just the power of the light tube to deliver a signal right down there. And if something were to fail, you would know because it wouldn't illuminate. That was genius and incredibly reliable engineering all the way back in 1968. So one of the absolutely weirdest things about driving this car, which is almost surreal, is actually the seating position. You don't so much drive a C3 Corvette as you drive the car behind the C3 Corvette. Because if you take a look, you are sitting essentially on top of the rear axle, which means that most of the car, a good 2/3 of the car, is in front of where you're sitting, which is an absolutely crazy experience behind the wheel. But it also means these cars are kind of hard to park because you can't really see that pointy nose. So a lot of C3 Corvettes you'll see will actually have crumpled noses because people have no idea where the front end is and they just drive them into things.
Once you're sitting inside the C3 Corvette, the weirdness continues, because if you're any larger than I am, getting in and out of the car can be a challenge with where the steering wheel is placed and getting your leg past it. The other funky thing is the gauges here. The angle on this dash has such a cascade to it that the gauges are pushed way toward the front of the car. You've also got some really cool gauges in the center stack, and Tommy pointed out that if you want to change the radio station, you pretty much have to get up out of your seat to manipulate the controls.
There are some really cool 1960s details in this car that are very space age. For example, this car didn't have quarter windows, and that was a big deal back in the 60s. So what Chevrolet marketed was something called astro ventilation, and they were so proud of it, they actually etched it in the window, which is crazy. But astro ventilation was essentially fresh air that could be vented in via these vents on either side of the car, and there's a switch in the middle that you can use to open and close. The radio in the C3 Corvette does something pretty cool, actually. If you optioned the AM/FM radio, check this out. So you've got your little display here. Right now I'm showing FM, but there's clearly not enough numbers for AM. So what you do is you slide this little toggle over to AM, and then the whole plate actually pivots. So now you've got 6 through 16 versus 88 through 108 for FM, which is just a really cool little detail thing. This car is full of those little features. So we got in this video, and Case completely failed to mention until about 70% of the way filming that I'm wearing a Land Rover hat.
Yeah, well, I figured you dressed yourself this morning, so you probably knew.
To be honest with you, I thought I was wearing a TFL hat and not a Land Rover hat, but believe it or not, the 68 Corvette video is not sponsored by Land Rover.
Nor is anything we do, unfortunately.
Oh!
That's not bad.
Not bad. So, of course, the first thing you want to know when you get behind the wheel of a Corvette is it fast?
Well, no, it's not fast.
No, it's not fast.
It's funny the way that this car accelerates, because here at the company I do all of our motorcycle reviews, and this car accelerates a lot like a Harley Davidson, where right off idle you get a punch of torque and you think, whoa, there might be something here. But then it just kind of maintains that amount of acceleration all the way through the rev range.
3, 2, 1, go.
Oh, it did a burnout!
A little slow on the start, and we're neck and neck.
Come on, Chevrolet! 5,000 RPM in a second.
Tommy is actually pulling ahead.
Woo-hoo-hoo! Yeah, Bald Eagles! That's a lot of oil out the tailpipe. In the third.
But he's pulling away! For real!
Oh, yeah. Woo-hoo-hoo! Now listen, I'm a big Volkswagen Beetle fan.
Oh yeah.
Coming out of a 68 Beetle, this car is a rocket ship. So I think by 68 standards, this 327 was kind of punchy, right? I mean, it's not fast, but it does have a good push kind of right off idle, like you said.
You're not going to slow down traffic in this car, that's for sure. You can go whatever speed you want to go, but by modern standards, it's nowhere even near brushing up against fast.
You're exactly right. However, it's a very fun experience, right? If all you're used to is modern cars, even modern Corvettes, having kind of that immediacy of response with the carburetor and that low lump coming out of the exhaust is such a cool feeling in 2025 when everything's going hybridized.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very analog, it's very traditional, very old school, unrefined in a lot of ways, but that also kind of adds to its character.
Now, I have driven a couple C3 Corvettes, specifically a pristine 77 with a small block 350, an automatic transmission, and I knew that by 77 the cars were going to be pretty slow, but nothing could have prepared me for just how slow that 77 was. It's like the engine was vaguely connected to the rear wheels. It was unbelievable. It's amazing like how badly companies struggled with emission and fuel economy requirements in the 70s, and it wasn't just Chevrolet, it was everybody.
Well, and that's due also in part to the automatic transmission in that car, because then you just have a much more rubbery connection to the wheels, whereas this car, at least being a manual, it is a more direct line between the engine and the wheels, more responsive. It doesn't feel as rubber bandy.
You're exactly right. And speaking of manual, this Corvette is actually pretty rare. It's one of only, as Corvette people like to say, a couple hundred made with a 3-speed manual transmission.
Yeah, so it's rare in a way that no one really wants, because instead of a 4-speed, which was very little additional to upgrade to, this car was spec'd absolutely as base as possible with a 3-speed, with no air conditioning. This car is as simple as it gets.
Yeah, I mean, no power windows, no power steering in this car. It is a total 100% base model, which means that if you're buying a Corvette for performance, you're going to be bitterly disappointed.
Yeah.
But if you're buying a Corvette as a great cruiser, that's what these C3s do really well, because the design is so good, and actually the comfort and livability is decent enough where on a nice Saturday night, there's almost nothing better.
Even considering the era that this comes out of, this car feels more to me like a Grand Tourer than a really focused performance car. And I get that those things back in the day might not have been as separated. This car was never going to be crazy stiff and crazy tight, at least by modern car standards. But like you said, this is 100% a cruiser car. It is possible in the aftermarket to take one of these and turn them into pretty quick cars, because you were even talking about earlier, there was a guy who won an entire huge autocross championship with a C3.
100%, yeah. I mean, and look, it's kind of hard to say that, oh, this car is a cruiser. It is a cruiser because it's a base model convertible. If you were to get a ZL1 C3, it's going to be pretty sharp, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be very race-oriented with an all-aluminum big block engine. This is kind of a cruiser spec, so it's not much of a surprise that, hey, look, go figure, the cruiser spec is a cruising car.
Yeah.
But I still think there's a couple of highlights in this car. For one, the steering, right? Full manual steering. This car's had its suspension gone through, and the steering is shockingly quick and very precise, which I was not expecting from a GM car from the late 60s.
Yeah, and that combined with a nice exhaust note, manual transmission, even if it is only a 3-speed, and that steering plus the open top above us makes this a really fun car to drive. So if you're looking at one of these, so long as you understand what it is that you're getting into, this could be a really great buy.
And what you gotta understand is, like, let's say you're shopping for a cool performance car that was beautiful from the 1960s, right? What this car competed up against, 68 Corvette, right? You had Jaguar E-Types.
Yeah.
If you were to cross-shop one of these with those cars today, a 68 911 in even this kind of decent driver condition is going to be 3, 4, 5 times the price of this.
Oh yeah, easily.
We picked up this 68 for about $20,000. And you can get the later ones easily 10 to 12 grand, maybe 15 for a good one if you wanted like a mid to late 70s car. And that's a lot of design for 15 grand.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, a lot of looks, and a big lumpy V8 for an amount of money that for a lot of people is doable.
Yeah, for sure. Now, of course, I don't think I can think of a single car model that has as big of a spread as a C3 Corvette. So you can get a pretty ratty 1978 car. The 78, I think 79 was the best-selling year for Corvette ever.
Yeah.
So even though people hate 79, saying they're slow and piddly, they sold well over 50 grand in 79.
Yeah, and you could get one if it's rough enough for under 10,000.
Exactly. And then let's say you want a really nice 69 Corvette with the side pipes and a big block, you could easily be 30, 40, 50 grand. But let's say you want one of the few ZL1s out there, you're going to be $3 million bucks. So
Yeah.
we're talking a spread of $8,000 to $3 million.
Yeah.
It's a crazy situation.
For vehicles that are down to the bones of them,
The same car.
it's the same generation of the same car.
Which is absolutely wild. But no, like, I think that it's interesting, and we were talking about this off camera a little bit, is like, at what point did C3 and C4 Corvette hate start? Because even in 79, people knew that these cars were probably pretty slow.
Yeah.
And yet something like 54,000 people lined up and said, I want that car. So clearly people liked them back in 79. Same thing with the C4 Corvette. That car was a world beater. When does that kind of mindset shift to like, wow, these cars actually suck?
Yeah, it is interesting because we've heard those things the same as most people out there. If you're typing on your computer right now, you might be saying these cars are piles of garbage. And that's always the things that we've grown up hearing. But getting in them and driving them, it's hard not to see the fun and the appeal of these vehicles, especially price considered. So, yeah, it's interesting. I don't know where a lot of the hate for them really began.
And I think if you're going to blame anybody for the poor performance of the C3 Corvette, it was kind of just a product of its time, right? I'm sure when this car launched in 68, as we saw with some special cars like the ZL1 or the all aluminum 350s that they had, right? Like, this was supposed to be a performance car, but then you had the OPEC disaster, and then you had the emissions requirements. And at the time, it wasn't just Chevrolet's quote-unquote bad engineering. Nobody could figure out how to make power in the late 70s.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
even
true.
Porsche was way down on power. So really, it was just a car of its era, and you can't really blame the car for that.
No, I don't think so. I wonder if some of the hate for these cars started with Top Gear.
I wonder. It's an
could be.
interesting point.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, I think that there's this, oh no, yeah, there we go. There's this reputation that, Corvettes looked great, but were kind of built shoddily, and certainly some of that is true with
there
this
is
car.
some truth to that.
Yeah, right. I mean, it does rattle like a cabbage cart, but for its era, this was, especially 68, 69, 70, 71, these were really high performance cars that gave Porsches and Jaguars and everything a run for its money, even some Ferraris, depending on the specification.
Yeah, and look, they're not built as well as Porsches or a lot of cars from foreign markets, but they were also not priced as such.
No, it was like a third of the price of a 911.
Yeah, which is part of the reason that these cars are actually accessible to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Unlike, like you said, an E-Type or a 911, most people can't afford those. And I'm not saying that, you know, $10,000, $20,000 for a C3 Corvette is nothing. It's still a good chunk of money, but it's doable.
And for this amount of looks and just the sound alone, that's pretty cool. So there you have it, folks, our deep dive on the C3 Corvette and Case, worthy of the hate or underrated?
I think it's an underrated vehicle, especially price considered, because between $10,000 and $20,000 on the low end for some of maybe the less desirable C3s, you can get yourself a beautiful, fun to drive cruiser car, if not the fastest thing.
That's right, and if you were mechanically inclined like Case, you could do a bunch of mechanical swaps and conversions and really make this a performance car as well. So out of the box, it's a great cruiser that looks fantastic, and then with some additional money and time, you can make them super cool.
But let us know what you think in the comments below. What is your favorite and least favorite generation of Corvette? And that's all for this video. We'll see you next time.